Before we go to the section on all-embracing categories, we will go back to the section on Bodhibhakya, the last stanza, the last verse of that section, and that is on page 283. All these occur in the supramundane, except at times intention and zest. In the mundane too, they occur in the course of the sixfold purification according to circumstances. Now this verse shows, where we find these factors, members of enlightenment, or those that lead to enlightenment. So all these occur in the supramundane, all satipatthana, samappadhana, and so on. They arise with supramundane types of consciousness or lokuttara consciousness, except at times intention and zest. That means vitakka and piti. So they may not arise with every type of supramundane consciousness. For example, vitakka does not arise with second jhana, supramundane consciousness, and so on. And piti does not arise with third jhana, supramundane consciousness, and so on. In the mundane too, in lokiya cetas, they occur in the course of the sixfold purification according to circumstances. Now, sixfold purification refer to the kinds of purification that will be treated in the 9th chapter, especially in the section on vipassana meditation. So when a person practices vipassana meditation, he begins with purification of sila, and then purification of mind, purification of views, and so on. So there are altogether 7 kinds of purification, and the last purification belongs to supramundane. So here in the mundane, they occur in the course of the sixfold purification. So when you purify your sila, when you take precepts and abstain from bodily misconduct and so on, then these bodhibhakya dhammas can be found in your mind. And when you practice meditation and reach the second purification and third purification and so on, then these satipatthana and so on can be found in these cetas or consciousnesses. So the bodhibhakya dhammas can be found in the kama vachara kusala, kama vachara kiriya, and then rupa vachara, arupa vachara, kusala kiriya, and lokuttara cetas. So you'll study the sixfold or sevenfold purification in the 9th chapter. Okay, now we go to the next section called Sabba Sangaha, compendium on the whole. Sabba means all or whole, and here it means categories which include all paramattha dhammas, or all 72 dhammas mentioned at the beginning of this chapter. The first is the category of 5 aggregates. So the first 5 aggregates. You already know the 5 aggregates. The aggregate of matter, aggregate of feeling, aggregate of perception, aggregate of mental formations, and aggregate of consciousness. Or in Pali, Rupa Khanda, Vedana Khanda, Sanya Khanda, Sankhara Khanda, and Vijnana Khanda. Now the word Khanda means a group, a mass, or an aggregate, or a heap. But the aggregate or the group of mass is not the real group of, say, matter and so on. It is the group that we form in our minds, that we take them to be groups. Because one particle of rupa is called rupa khanda. Not the group of rupas, but just one rupa is called rupa khanda. So here group does not mean physical group. Group that does not mean, say, a group of 10 material properties or 30 material properties. Because each one of them is called khanda or aggregate. In order to be included in the aggregate, they must have some divisions. Now, whenever Buddha described rupa and so on, he described whatever kind of materiality there is, whether past, future, or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near. This is called the material aggregate. Now, that one rupa, that one material property can be past, present, or future. Or it can be internal or external. It can be gross or subtle. It can be inferior or superior, or it can be far or near. So when a state has that kind of division, then that state can be called a khanda or aggregate. So one particle of matter can belong to past or present or future. So we take these three as a whole, as a group in our mind, and then call that one particular material property aggregate. So aggregate or group of mass here does not mean a group of different kinds of material properties, but just a group of different divisions of one state, one material property, and others. The same with feelings and so on. That particular material property may belong to our bodies, or it may belong to outside things. So when we see a rupa, we group these two as one and call that aggregate. So if a state has a division into past, future, and present, then we can call that an aggregate. Or if that state has the division into internal and external, then we can call it an aggregate. Or if that has the division into gross and subtle, then we can form an aggregate in our minds. Or if that material property or whatever is divided into inferior and superior, then we can take these two as a whole and call it an aggregate. And if it is divided into far and near, then we can take these two as one group and call it a group or call it an aggregate. So when we say aggregate, we do not mean the physical group of Rupa, Vedana and so on, because each one of these Rupa and Vedana can be called an aggregate. Now the first one is Rupa Khanda, the aggregate of Rupa. So the aggregate of Rupa, in reality, Rupa Khanda is 28 material properties. Each one of these 28 material properties is called an aggregate. The second is Vedana Khanda, feeling aggregate. Here also feeling can be past, future or present, feeling can be internal or external, feeling can be gross or subtle and so on. And so even one feeling is called an aggregate. The third is Sanyak Khanda, aggregate of perception. Now you know Sanya. Sanya is something that makes a mark of the object. So one Sanya is called here aggregate of Sanya, because Sanya can be past, future, present and so on. Fourth is Sankhara Khanda. Sankhara Khanda comprises of the 50 Cetasikas other than Vedana and Sanya. Among the 50 Cetasikas, there is what is called Cetana. Now you know the Cetasika Cetana. And you know that Cetana is what we call Kama. So in prolonging suffering in the samsara, Cetana is an active factor. Cetana urges us, say, to do something, and so we acquire karma and so on. And so Cetana is predominant among other Cetasikas. And so the 50 Cetasikas are collectively called Sankhara Khanda. Sankhara means Cetana. So here, aggregate of Sankhara means aggregate headed by Cetana, or aggregate that has Cetana at its head. Therefore, Sankhara Khanda means the remaining 50 Cetasikas. Phassa is also included in Sankhara Khanda. Vedana Sanya no. Cetana included in Sankhara Khanda. And then what? Ekagata, Sankhara Khanda, and so on. So the remaining 50 Cetasikas are all called Sankhara Khanda. Here also, each one of them is called Sankhara Khanda. One Cetana is called Sankhara Khanda. One Phassa is called Sankhara Khanda. Because each one of them can be divided into past, future, present, and so on. The fifth aggregate is Vijnana Khanda, aggregate of consciousness. And that comprises all Cetas, 89 or 121 Cetas. Now, or later on. Okay, so Rupa Khanda means 28 Rupas according to Paramattha Dhammas or ultimate reality. Vedana Khanda means Vedana. Sanya Khanda means Sanya. Sankhara Khanda means 50 Cetasikas. And Vijnana Khanda means 89 or 121 Cetas. Although it is called Sabba Sangha, I mean, the compendium of states comprising all, khandhas does not include, khandhas do not include what? Nibbana, right? Khandas do not include Nibbana. So Nibbana is out of the aggregates. We do not call Nibbana an aggregate because Nibbana has no division into past, present, future, internal, external, and so on. So the author will explain it later on in this section. Okay, next group is Upadana-khanda. Now you know Upadana. How many Upadanas are there? 4 Upadanas. Can you name them? Kama Upadana, Ditti Upadana, Silabhada Upadana, Attavada Upadana, right? There are 4 Upadanas, 4 clingings. But in reality there are only 2. What? Lobha and Ditti. Okay. So Upadana-khanda means aggregate of clinging. Now aggregates of clinging means aggregates that are objects of clinging. Now we must understand that. Not the aggregates belonging to clinging, but the aggregates that are the object of clinging. In the note on page 286, about the middle of the paragraph, here all components of the 5 aggregates that enter into range of the 4 types of clinging are called aggregate of clinging. It's a little difficult to understand, right? So all components of the 5 aggregates that are objects of clinging are called aggregates of clinging. So that's a straight meaning. So the khanda and upadana-khanda, we should understand the difference between khanda and upadana-khanda. Now upadana-khanda means aggregates that are objects of clinging. Now you go back to the 3rd chapter. Now clinging consists of lobha and ditti, right? What is the object of lobha or akusala? Mundane states, right? What is the object of ditti? Same, mundane states. So rupupadana-khanda, rupa aggregate of clinging, means 28 rupas. There is no difference between khanda and upadana-khanda with reference to the first one. So just 28 rupas, right? So these 28 rupas are the object of clinging. That means we can be attached to these 28 rupas. We can have wrong view about these 28 rupas. So they are called in this category rupupadana-khanda. Aggregate of rupa, which is the object of clinging. The second one is Vedanupada-nakhanda. And this is Vedana. Now, here Vedanupada-nakhanda means Vedana concomitant with what? Mundane cetas, Lokiya cetas. So here Vedanupada-nakhanda does not include Vedana concomitant with Lokutara cetas. The same with Sanya, Sanyupada-nakhanda, aggregate of clinging of perception. Here also, not all perception, but perception that accompanies 81 Lokiya, mundane cetas. And then the 4th one, Sankharupada-nakhanda, aggregate of clinging of sankharas. Remaining 50 cetasikas, again, those that are concomitant with mundane cetas. The last one, Vinyanupada Nakanda. Cetas. Here also, not all cetas, right? Lokiya, 81 Lokiya cetas. So, on the side of Paramattha Dhamma, 28 rupas, Vedana, Sanya, and all these are given as the same as the khandas. Although they are the same here, you must understand that with regard to Upadana Khanda, they must be the object of clinging. So they must accompany or they must be Lokiya Cetas. But Rupa, there is no Rupa which is not the object of clinging. So there is no difference here. And Rupa is always Lokiya, right? If you go back to the 6th chapter, Rupa is described as what? Lokiya, right? The second section of 6th chapter. So, since Rupa is always Lokiya, there is no difference in Paramattha Dhamma between Rupakhanda and Rupupada Khanda. Okay. Now, why are there two groups, Khanda and Upadana Khanda? Khanda seems to be general, right? So when we say Khanda, we mean everything there is, everything that has the same characteristic. So when we say Rupa Khanda, then we take all of the material properties that have the characteristic of the change. But when we say Rupupada Khanda, we don't mean, we mean the same, right? Because there is no difference. Okay. Now when we say Vedana Khanda, we mean all Vedanas. Vedana accompanying all 121 types of consciousness. But when we say Vedanupada Khanda, we mean only Vedana that accompanies 81 mundane cetas. Right? So this way you go. So what is the difference? Why there are two groups? So as I said before, the first group seems to be a general. But the second group is for the purpose of vipassana. So when you practice vipassana meditation, you take Upadana Khanda as an object, not Khanda in general as object. Or in other words, when you practice vipassana, you take only mundane cetas, cetasikas and rupa as object. You cannot take Lokuttara Ceta and Nibbana as object, simply because you have not attained it, you have not seen it yet. So, to show the soil of vipassana, Buddha taught the Upadana Khandas, and also to show states, all the states that have the same characteristic, that means to embrace all that have the same characteristic, Buddha taught the doctrine of khandas. So this is the difference between the doctrine of khanda and upadana khanda. So with regard to the first khanda or upadana khanda, there is no difference. But between the second, third, fourth and fifth of each group, there is difference. So upadana khanda means aggregates that are object of clinging, or in other words, mundane aggregates. Now it is important to understand this, because when we talk about vipassana, we say, what is vipassana? What do you observe when you practice vipassana? And the answer, according to the books, is you observe, or you are to be mindful of the 5 aggregates of clinging. So if you dwell on, if you keep your mind on the 5 aggregates of clinging, you are doing vipassana. But if you keep your mind on paññattis, like when you practice kasina meditation, you are not doing vipassana. No, in that case you are doing samatha meditation. So vipassana meditation takes upadana khandas as object. So it must be the object of clinging. In other words, it must be something which we can be attached to, or which we can have wrong view about it. So the 4 mental aggregates of the supramundane plane are not aggregates of clinging, because they entirely transcend the range of clinging. So they go beyond the range of clinging. That is, they cannot become objects of greed or wrong views. So that is why Lokuttara Cetas and also Cetasikas going along with Lokuttara Cetas are not included in the Upadana Khandas. Now, next group is Ayatana, bases. Ayatana means a base or a house, a place. So these are said to be house of what? Consciousness, right? Consciousness depends upon them to arise. So they are like house of consciousness and so on. And there are altogether 12 bases, 12 ayatanas. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They are called what? Internal. And 7 to 12 are called external. So number 1 is Chakha Yatana. That means Chakhu Ayatana. Eye base. Eye base is what? According to Paramattha Dhamma, according to reality, Chakhu Pasara, eye sensitivity. So eye sensitivity is called eye base. Number 2, Sota Ayatana, ear base. And its Paramattha Dhamma is ear sensitivity. And number 3, Ghana Yatana, nose base, and its Paramattha Dhamma is Ghana Pasara, nose sensitivity. Number 4, Jihva Yatana, tongue base, and its Paramattha Dhamma is Jihva Pasara, tongue sensitivity. Number 5, Kaya Yatana, body base, and its ultimate reality is Kaya Pasara, body sensitivity. And then number 6 is what? Manayatana, mind base. And Manayatana means all chetas. These 6 are internal bases. Now we come to external bases. Rupa Yatana, that means visible. Rupa means visible object, like Rupa, Saddha, Gandha, Rasa, Pottabha. And Saddha Yatana, sound base, right? So it is Saddha or sound. Gandha Yatana, smell base. It is Gandha, smell. And then Rasa Yatana, taste base, and it is taste. And Pottabha Yatana, you know, Pottabha is the combination of 3 essential elements. And these three are earth element, fire element, and air element. So no water element. And number 12 is Dhamma Yatana, Dhamma base. And Dhamma base consists of Cetasikas, 52 Cetasikas, Sukhuma Rupa. How many Sukhuma Rupas are there? Subtle Rupa. 16. So 16 subtle Rupas and Nibbana. 52 plus 16 plus 1, 69. So these 69 Paramatha Dhammas are called Dhamma Yatana. Now, depending on number 1 Chakka Yatana and number 7 Rupa Yatana, what arises? Seeing, eye consciousness arises. Same way, depending on number 2 and number 8, ear consciousness arises, and so on. Now, on page 290, the translation of the first paragraph. Here in 69 states, comprising 52 mental factors, 16 kinds of subtle matter, and Nibbana are regarded as the Dhamma object base and the Dhamma object element. Dhamma base and Dhamma element. The mind base itself is divided into the 7 elements of consciousness. That means all types of consciousness. We found seven types of consciousness somewhere. Third chapter. Right. I think third chapter, Vattu Sangha. Right? You remember them? What? Chakku Viññāna, Sota Viññāna, Kāna Viññāna, Jihva Viññāna, Kaya Viññāna, Manodhatu. And there is no Viññāna in it. Huh? Manodhatu, and then Mano Viññāna. So Manayana will be divided into these 7 Viññānas. And so we will get 18 dhatus, 18 elements. Now, if you go down to page 290, owing to the differences between doors and objects, there are 12 sense bases. Now, sense bases are 12 because there is a division into doors and objects. 6 doors and 6 objects, something like that. Now, Chakka Yatana is what? Eye door, right? And Sota Yatana, ear door. Ghana Yatana, nose door. Jihva Yatana, tongue door. Kaya Yatana, body door. Mana Yatana, mind door. Okay. So, here there are 2 explanations. One is, now mind means Chaita, right? So, in order for one Chaita to arise, another Chaita must disappear. For example, in order for Chakku Viññāna to arise, Panchadvara Vajana must disappear, right? In order for Sampadichana to arise, Chakku Viññāna must disappear. So, in that sense, every type of consciousness is a dwara for the other type of consciousness that follows it. So in that sense, all types of consciousness can be called what? Mind door. Only in that sense, not strictly speaking, right? You all of us know that strictly speaking, manodwara means what? Yeah? Bhavanga, right? Manodwara means bhavanga. All information of all chapters are involved, right? That is why I repeatedly told you to be really familiar with the chapters which we have studied. So here, manayatana, or manayatana means here manodwara, and manodwara here is to be taken in that sense, that every type of consciousness is a door for another every type of consciousness to arise. That is why they can be called manodwara. Another explanation is bhavanga is manodwara. So, although we call manayatana here, we must understand it to be the bhavanga, but only bhavanga. And then, when we take bhavanga, then we can take other chetas as well, because they are same with regard to being cheta. So in that case, every cheta is called manodwara again. But strictly speaking, according to the second explanation, manodwara means bhavanga. So there is a little, what do we call that? Yeah? Discrepancy or something like that. So again, manayatana, strictly speaking, manayatana means all chetas. But when we explain why there are 12 ayatanas, we say, because there are objects, because there are dwaras, doors, and there are objects, that is why there are 12 ayatanas. And then when we go through these one by one, substituting dwara for ayatana, then when we reach manayatana, we meet with difficulty, right? We have problem there. So manayatana means every cheta which is a door for every other cheta to arise, or it is really the bhavanga, but here as bhavanga and other chetas are same as chetas, we take them all. Okay, let's go further. Rupayatana. What is this? Rupayatana is ruparamana, right? Aramana, the object. Saddhayatana, saddharamana. Gandhayatana, gandharamana. Rasayatana, rasaramana. Puttabhayatana, puddhabharamana. And then Dhammayatana. Is it Dhammaramana?
No.
Go back to the third chapter. Dhammaramana consists of what? Yeah, sixfold, right. Yeah. Yeah. Pasada, Sukhuma Rupa, Chitta, Chetasika, Nibbana, Panyati. So these 6 kinds of objects are called Dhammaramana in the 3rd chapter. But here Dhammayatana does not mean all of them. Dhammayatana mean only Cetasikas, Sukhuma Rupas and Nibbana. So what are not included in Dhammayatana? Chitta, and then pasadas, right? So they are not included in Dhammayatana. Because 5 pasadas are respectively Jakhayatana, Sodayatana and so on. And Cetas are Manayatana. So they are not included in Dhammayatana. So we must understand this clearly. Dhammaramana and Dhammayatana are not the same. Some belong to both Dhammayatana and Dhammaramana, but not 5 pasadas and Ceta. And Manayatana and Manodhvara, they are not same. Actually, they are not same. Okay, so there are 12 bases. Now 18 elements. The first 6, the first 5, right, are dwaras. And then from 6 to 10 are aramanas. And from 11 to 18 are vinyanas. Right? Vinyanas. 18 includes... No, 18 does not include Vijnana. So, Chakku Dhatu means, according to Paramattha Dhamma, Chakku Dhatu means Chakku Basara. Soda Dhatu, Soda Basara. Ghana Dhatu, Ghana Basara. Jihva Dhatu, Jihva Basara. Kaya Dhatu, Kaya Basara. And then Rupa Dhatu means Rupa, visible object. Saddha Dhatu means Saddha, Gandha Dhatu means Gandha, Rasa Dhatu means Rasa, Pottabha Dhatu means Pathavi, Tejo and Vayo, earth, fire and air. Now we come to Vinyanas. Chakku Vinyana Dhatu. That means 2 Chakku Vinyana Cetas, or 2 eye consciousnesses. And Sota Vinyana Dhatu means Sota Vinyana 2, Ghana Vinyana Dhatu means Ghana Vinyana 2, Jiva Vinyana Dhatu means Jiva Vinyana 2, Kaya Vinyana Dhatu means Kaya Vinyana 2. Mano Dhatu means Pancha Dwara Vajana and Sampadichana, these 2. And Mano Vinyana Dhatu means the remaining 76 Cetas. That means 10 Chakku Vinyana and so on, Panchadvara Vajana and Sampadechana. So they are excluded. So the remaining 76 Cetas are Mano Vinyana Dhatu. And then the last one is Dhamma Dhatu. And Dhamma Dhatu and Dhamma Yatana are same. So it comprises Cetasikas, Sukhuma Rupas, and Nibbana. So why are there 18 dhatus? The explanation given at the end on page 290 again is in accordance with doors, objects and their corresponding consciousness arise the 18 elements. So the elements are 18 in accordance with doors, objects and their corresponding consciousness. So we can see whether we can combine them. Chakku Dhatu, Rupa Dhatu, Chakku Vinyana Dhatu. Right? So number 1, number 6, number 11. One pair or one group, something like that. So Sota Dhatu, Saddha Dhatu, Sota Vinyana. Ghana Dhatu, Gandha Dhatu, Ghana Vinyana. Jihva Dhatu, Rasa Dhatu, Jihva Vinyana Dhatu. Kaya Dhatu, Pottabha Dhatu, Kaya Vijnana Dhatu. Right. So Mano Dhatu and Mano Vijnana Dhatu. No corresponding. Huh? Because they take more objects than the other. So because there are doors, objects, and their corresponding consciousness, the dhatus are 18 in number. Okay, now we come to the 4 truths, or 4 noble truths. Satya or Ariya Satya. And you all know the 4 noble truths. Dukkha Ariya Satya, Dukkha Samudaya Ariya Satya, Dukkha Nirodha Ariya Satya, Dukkha Nirodha Gamini Patibada Ariya Satya. Now, Satya means truth. So something that is true is called Satya. So it need not be high, it need not be lofty, it need not be wholesome, whether wholesome or unwholesome, high or low. What is true is called truth. So that is why Loba is also called a truth. So in the teachings of the Buddha, truth does not necessarily mean high and lofty and wholesome states, whether high or low, wholesome or unwholesome. If they are true as they are described, then they are called truth. And in the explanation in the book manual, it is said that the 4 noble truths are the fundamental teaching of the Buddha, discovered by him on the night of his enlightenment. So these 4 noble truths were discovered by the Buddha while he was sitting under the Bodhi tree and practicing vipassana meditation. So at the end of vipassana, he realized these 4 noble truths. So these 4 noble truths were discovered by him for the first time since the disappearance of the former previous Buddha, the Kassapa Buddha, and expounded by him repeatedly during his long ministry. And Buddha taught the 4 noble truths again and again, and during 45 years of his ministry. These 4 truths are called noble, Ariya, because they are penetrated by the noble ones. Now, why are they called noble truths? Now, there are different reasons given. The first reason given is they are called Ariya, they are called noble, because they are penetrated by the noble ones. They are understood by the noble ones. That is why they are called noble truth. So, in this, according to this explanation, noble truth means truth penetrated by noble ones. Another explanation is because they are the truths taught by the Supreme Noble One. Here Ariya means Ariya of Ariyas, the best of Ariyas, that is the Buddha. So they were taught by the Ariya of Ariya, the noblest of the nobles. That is why they are called noble truth. So according to this explanation, noble truth means truth taught by the noblest of the nobles, by the Buddha. Another explanation is because their discovery leads to the state of a noble one. That means discovery of them or realization of them will make you become a noble person. That is why they are called noble. Noble truth. That means truth that will make you a noble one. That makes you a noble one. Now the last explanation. Because they are the real, unalterable, undeceptive truths about existence. That means they are the real truth, the true truth, the real truth. That is called that is why they are called noble truths. Now you understand why they are called noble truths. So here full explanations are given. So the first is what? Truth penetrated by noble ones, and second, truth taught by the noblest of the nobles, and number three, truth that makes you become a noble one. That means when you realize the Four Noble Truths, you become a noble person, you become an Arya. And the fourth is the real truth, unalterable truth, undeceptive truth. So it is not deceptive, and it is real. So it is called noble truth. And according to Buddhism, there are four noble truths, four truths and not one truth. And the first of them is called Dukkha, Ariya Satya, the noble truth of suffering. Now, the noble truth of suffering is expounded as 12-fold. Now, if you remember the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, you understand it easily. Buddha described the first noble truth as comprising 12 things. Suffering, right? The suffering of birth. So birth is suffering, aging, getting old is suffering, death is suffering, sorrow is suffering, lamentation, pain, grief, despair, suffering. Association with the unpleasant, unwanted is suffering. Separation from the pleasant, separation from whom you love or what you love is suffering. Not to get what one wants is suffering. And the 5 aggregates of clinging are suffering. So this is the Buddha's explanation of noble truth of suffering. Here, not to get what one wants. How was it defined, explained in the Mahasatipatthana Sutta? You remember? You want to win at lotto, but you don't. Does that mean that? Then what is that? Not to get what one wants is suffering. You don't want to get old, but you get old. Yeah? Right? You don't want to get sick, but you get sick. You don't want to die, but you die. So that is suffering. Not that you want something and you don't get it. Although that may be included in suffering, but the Buddha's explanation is not that. Okay. And the 5 aggregates of clinging are suffering. So the 5 aggregates of clinging themselves are suffering. So that is why we must be honest in describing the noble truth of suffering. Sometimes people want to a little soften the meaning of the word so that it could be acceptable to many people, and they say subject to suffering or something like that. But it is not subject to suffering, but it is itself suffering. We must understand this. Whether we like it or not, but we must understand this. Now, when Buddha says the 5 aggregates of clinging are suffering, they are suffering. Not that they are subject to suffering. If they are subject to suffering, suffering is one thing and the 5 aggregates will be another. But here what Buddha meant was they themselves are suffering because they are oppressed by arising and disappearing. Now you must understand the real meaning of dukkha. What is the meaning of dukkha? Being oppressed by arising and disappearing. This is the characteristic of dukkha. This is the mark of dukkha. If you want to know whether something is dukkha or not, you must try to find out whether it is oppressed by arising and disappearing. So that is very important. Only when you see dukkha in that way do you see dukkha really. Otherwise, your understanding of dukkha is not deep enough. So you hit yourself and there is pain and dukkha, right? You may say, oh, it is dukkha. That is very superficial understanding of dukkha. But here, the 5 aggregates of clinging are dukkha means they themselves are dukkha because they are oppressed by arising and disappearing. So being oppressed by arising and disappearing is the mark of being dukkha. Concisely, the noble truth of suffering comprises all phenomena of the 3 mundane planes of existence except craving. Actually, craving is also dukkha, right? But since the name samudaya is given to it, we do not include it in dukkha. But according to that criteria, craving is also dukkha, because it arises and it disappears, so it is oppressed by arising and disappearing. So it is dukkha. But here it is singled out as one separate truth, because it is the predominant cause for the prolongation of existence in the samsara. The noble truth of the origin of suffering, dukkha samudaya. Samudaya means cause or origin. So dukkha samudaya means origin of dukkha. So the noble truth of the origin of dukkha, and it is a single factor, namely craving, which is identical with the cetasika of greed, lobha. So second noble truth is lobha. Craving, however, has 3 aspects. Craving for sense pleasures, kama tanha, craving for continued existence, bhava tanha, and craving for annihilation, vibhava tanha. So, in the Dhammacakka Bhavatana Sutta or in the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, this explanation is given. Now, this is the second noble truth is just tanha or lobha, and it has 3 aspects: the craving for sense pleasure and so on. Now, the second and the third are almost always misunderstood by many people. Craving for continued existence, bhava tanha, and craving for annihilation, vibhava tanha. I'm a little uncomfortable to use for. Do you crave for annihilation? Craving for existence, it's all right, right? But craving for the annihilation, craving for death. So in Visuddhimagga and in other commentaries, these 2 are explained as craving first, bhavatana, right? So bhava here means the eternalist view, the view that the things are permanent. So bhava tanha means tanha accompanied by or accompanying wrong view. tanha accompanying wrong view that things are permanent. So that tanha is called bhava tanha. So according to that explanation, bhava tanha means not craving for continued existence, but craving which is concomitant with the wrong view that takes things to be permanent, that takes beings to be permanent, that takes all things to be permanent. So that is bhava tanha. And vibhava tanha. Vibhava means opposite of bhava, so non-existence or annihilation. Vibhava tanha means tanha accompanying the view that everything dies and no more. It is called annihilation. So beings, once a being dies, he's finished. There is no more rebirth for him, and so on. So that kind of view is called annihilationist view. And the craving which accompanies that view is called vibhava tanha. So bhava tanha is tanha concomitant with the wrong view which takes things and beings to be permanent, and vibhava tanha is craving which is concomitant with the wrong view that beings, beings are annihilated at death. So it is a little different than the translation given here. So that these are the three tanhas. Kama tanha is easy to understand. It is craving for sense pleasures, or craving for objects of senses. Whether it is kama tanha or bhava tanha or vibhava tanha, it is, according to Paramatha Dhamma, lobha. And the third noble truth is the dukkha nirodha ariya satya, the noble truth of the cessation. Nirodha means cessation, disappearance, cessation of suffering, and it is nibbana, which is to be realized by the eradication of craving. So realization of nibbana and eradication of craving occur at the same time. And the fourth noble truth is a long name, dukkha nirodha gamini padipada ariya satya. Noble truth of the practice. Patipada means the practice or the way. The noble truth of the practice, gamini means which goes to, or by which people go to, nirodha, cessation of dukkha. So it is usually translated as the way leading to the cessation of suffering. And that is 8 factors of noble path. The collection of these 8 factors of the path is called dukkha nirodha gamini padipada. There is a shorter name for this. What's that? Huh? Magga satya. And then another name. What way? Right way or left way? Or middle way? So middle way, magga satya or dukkha nirodha gamini padipada ariya satya, they are the same. So 8 factors of noble path. Okay. Now dukkha satya comprises lokiya chetas, chetasikas going along with them, and 28 rupas. They are called, oh wait a minute, we have to accept lobha from chetasikas here, right? So dukkha ariya sajja means lokiya chaita, cetasikas except lobha and rupa. And second ariya sajja is lobha. The third ariya sajja is nibbana. And the fourth ariya sajja is Noble Eightfold Path, or the 8 factors of path, Samma Ditti, Samma Sankappa, and so on. So among with regard to Dukkha Ariya Sajja, the Cetasikas mean Cetasikas except Lobha. As I said before, Lobha could be included in Dukkha Sajja also, but since it is designated as Lobha, as a separate truth, it is not included in Dukkha Sajja. The same with 8 factors of path. Okay, now there are some notes. As Nibbana lacks differentiation such as past, present, future, it is excluded from the category of aggregates. So Nibbana is not included in the aggregates because it has no division into past, present, future, internal, external, and so on. Only when something has this division can that be called an aggregate. But Nibbana cannot be said to be present, past, or future. So it has no division into present, past, future, and so it cannot be called an aggregate. And Nibbana is always external, not internal. So it has no division into external and internal, so Nibbana is not called aggregate, and so on. Now, one question. Why are Vedana and Sanya called separate aggregates? Why are they not included in Sankhara Khanda and only three aggregates? Now it is said that Buddha's teachings are for becoming dispassionate towards samsara, towards existence. And Vedana and Sanya are important factors that prolong the existence in the samsara. So that is why these two are picked out of other Cetasikas and then made into a separate aggregate. So Vedana one aggregate and Sanya one aggregate. Now Vedana is what experiences objects, or what enjoys the object. In order for Vedana to enjoy, or in order for Vedana to fully experience the object, it needs some flavor or something. And that flavor, that spice, is supplied by Sanya. That means most of the time we have distorted Sanya. We take things to be permanent. We take things to be beautiful, right? So because of that Sanya, we are attached to objects, or we are attached to life, and so on. We are attached to life because we fully experience these objects. So Vedana fully experiences the object, and in order for Vedana to fully experience the object, Sanya puts a flavor in the objects. If we really know that things are impermanent, we will not be attached to them. We will not experience them with relish. Now we are deceived by Sanya to take things as beautiful, and so we like this thing, we like that thing. So since these two are important factors in prolonging the samsara, prolonging the existence in the samsara, they are formed separate aggregate. So sanya aggregate, Vedana aggregate and sanya aggregate. So sanya can be compared to putting spice, say, in dishes. In order for the dish to be more palatable, say, more tasteful, we put some spices. So when there is spice, when sanya has deceived us, then we think something is good, although it is not good or bad. So sanya flavors the dish, and Vedana thoroughly enjoys it. And when it enjoys it, it is attached to it, and so there is tanha. So when there is Vedana, there is tanha. And when there is tanha, there is clinging, upadana. When there is upadana, there is bhava, which is kama. Right? So the existence in samsara goes on and on and on like that. So these two are important factors in prolonging the samsara, and so they are called the separate aggregates. Okay, the last one. The last one is now the four noble truths. But there are some things, some mental states and chetas that do not belong to any of these four noble truths. Now, apart from the 8 cetasikas corresponding to the 8 path factors, the other constituents of the supramundane path consciousness, the citta itself and the associated cetasikas, are not, strictly speaking, part of the eightfold path. So they do not belong to eightfold path. And thus are not comprehended, that means comprehended by or included in the four noble truths. The four fruits as well are excluded from the framework of the four noble truths. So there are some cetas and cetasikas which cannot be included in any of these four noble truths. So they are called outside the truths. What are they? Mental states associated with the paths. Now, think of the path consciousness. How many cetasikas are there with it? Sort of first consciousness. First path consciousness. 36. Among the 36, there are eight factors of path. Those 8 factors of path are real fourth satya, fourth truth. Then there is the citta, right? Magga citta. And say 36 minus 8, 28 cetasikas. So the citta and these 28 cetasikas are not Magga satya, right? The fourth noble truth is the 8 factors. So the Magga citta and the other cetasikas are not called fourth noble truth, right? And they cannot be put into any other truth. So they are called truth-free out of 4 noble truths. Altogether 29. If we take Magga citta as 1. And then Phala cittas. Again 36 cetasikas. So here both Phala citta and 36 cetasikas cannot be included in any of these 4 noble truths. So they are also outside the 4 noble truths. Let's go back in. Magga citta and Cetasikas going along with it, except the eight factors of path, are called free of truth, out of truth. And Phala-cetas and all the 36 Cetasikas going along with it is called truth-free. Yeah, they do not belong to any of the four truths. That is strictly speaking. But there are statements that there is nothing which is outside the Four Noble Truths. So according to that statement, we'll have to find some ways to put them into one of the truths. Right? So, the 8 path factors that arise with Phala-ceta can be included in Magga-sajja, the fourth noble truth, because they are the same as those that arise with Magga-ceta. So they can be put into the fourth noble truth. Then the other Cetasikas and Magga-ceta and Phala-ceta as well can be included in the first noble truth, because they have arising and disappearing. So they are oppressed by arising and disappearing, and so they have the characteristic of dukkha. So, because they are sankhara dukkha, right? Sankhara dukkha means those that have arising and disappearing belong to sankhara dukkha. So, in that way, we can include all the Cetas and Cetasika in the Four Noble Truths. So, the 8 factors, Sammaditthi, Sammasankappa, and so on, that arise with Phala-ceta can be included in the Magga-sajja, the fourth truth. Then, Magga-cetas, Phala-cetas, and Cetasikas other than the noble the 8 factors can be included in first noble truth, Dukkha-sajja. Why? Because they have the characteristic of dukkha, that is, being oppressed by arising and disappearing. So in that case, everything is included in the Four Noble Truths. But strictly speaking, 29, that means Ceta as one, Magga-ceta as one, and 28 Cetasikas. And then 37, Phala-ceta as one, and 36 Cetasikas. So they are said to be out of truth. So here, apart from the 8 Cetasikas corresponding to the 8 path factors, the other constituents of the supramundane path consciousness, the Ceta itself and the associated Cetasikas, are not strictly speaking part of the Eightfold Path. So they do not belong to the fourth Ariya Satya, and thus are not comprehended by the Four Noble Truths. So they are not included in Four Noble Truths. The Four Fruits as well are excluded from the framework of the Four Noble Truths. And that is strictly speaking. But say we can find some ways to include everything in the Four Noble Truths, following the statement that there is nothing outside the Four Noble Truths. Okay, now we come to the end of 7th chapter. So 7th chapter is also important chapter. It is not so difficult as other chapters, but it gives us a new terms and new categories and divisions. And also the last one is important if you want to study the Madhika of Dhammasankani as night lessons, as we studied in Burma. So when we study the Madhika, that is the matrix of Dhammasankani. And we have to find out which Paramattha Dhammas are represented by the words Kusala Dhamma, Akusala Dhamma, and so on. And then we must understand to what aggregates, bases, elements, and truths they belong. So, if you are interested in studying Dhammasankani as night lessons, then you have to be very familiar with, actually not only with this section, but with the whole of Abhidhamma Sangha. So, this chapter gives us further information about the ultimate realities. Now, the next chapter will be the chapter on cause and effect. And the two most important doctrines of the Buddha, the dependent origination and the causal relations.